Hello, I'm Scott Wrighton and I serve as Decatur's City Manager. I'd like to start by bringing you up to date on some COVID statistics and then spend some time talking about other things that are going on that have been, some that have been in the news and some that haven't been, about your city government. The positivity rate in Region 6, that's our part of the state of Illinois for COVID statistics, is 2.6%. The positivity rate for Macon County remains above the regional positivity rate, and it's at 3.6%. Now, while our local and regional numbers for positivity are still better than the statewide positivity rate of 5.0%, the rate continues to slowly inch up. Add to that the fact that a third variant now of the strain of COVID has been discovered here in Macon County, and add to that that the patient numbers, not only at local hospitals but also regional hospitals for people who are being admitted with COVID, continues to slowly increase, as well as other factors that contribute to the uncontrolled spread of the virus. And I think that this leads to the conclusion that we still have a problem. And this is why the state, the governor's office, has determined that we can't go to what they call the bridge status yet. That's moving us from phase 4 to phase 5. We cannot get there yet because the statistics for hospital admissions and the statistics for the positivity rate simply aren't supporting that. So what does that mean? It means that our safety procedures need to remain in place. It doesn't mean that there's lockdown. It doesn't mean that events have to be canceled. It means that those activities, which we want to have continue to happen, have to be conducted with the use of masks required and social distancing, and you've heard it all before. Those procedures need to be in place. We want and are planning on summer activities and gatherings to take place here in Decatur. But if they're downtown or if they're at the lake or other places where city property is going to be used, we aren't going to say no to those events. We're going to say there need to be rules and procedures and protocols for making sure that our citizens stay safe. So we hope that as you plan those activities, you will keep those things in mind, because this statistical change doesn't cause us to say we have to go back to shutdown. It means we have to continue to take this fairly simple safety precautions that many of us have just integrated into our lives anyway. The most effective thing we can all do, though, is to get vaccinated. Here in Illinois, a little over 75% of the population that's over 65 has received at least one dose. 45% of the population that's over the age of 16 has received at least one dose. Again, both of those numbers are statewide. Here in Macon County, the percentage of the population that's received at least one dose is less than 45%, so it's below the statewide average. The exact number, the Macon County Health Department is still trying to put together, and we'll have that information probably by the next time I have a chance to talk to you. Only 21% of the Macon County population has been fully vaccinated, meaning that they've had both of those doses. So we have some room to make up, and that remains the most effective way that we can get back to some degree of normalcy in the future, is to get the vaccine. It is widely available, and now the restrictions are gone. Anybody over the age of 16 can get the vaccination. Now, many of us have heard about the nationwide cessation in the use of the Johnson & Johnson inoculation. But here in Macon County, we have sufficient stockpiles of the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccination to satisfy demand locally for the foreseeable future. So there's no reason not to set an appointment. And in fact, the Macon County Health Department has recently started a walk-in clinic that you don't even need an appointment. But I'm not going to go through the details of what sort of appointment schedules or which website to go to. Just know that Crossing Healthcare is offering it. Of course, Walgreens and CVS are offering it, and the Macon County Health Department is as well. St. Mary's has their own new vaccination site over on the east side of the city. There are plenty of places where you can get the vaccination. Go to those websites for additional information about them. Separate from all of the discussion about COVID, I want to talk with you a little bit about the amount of federal funds that the city of Decatur has been receiving in 2020 and is scheduled to receive later in 2021. It's been a little bit in the news, but I want to expand on it. In 2020, under the previous administration, funds were made available not only to the city, but also to small businesses and to other recipients who've been directly affected by the economic effects of COVID. The mayor and city council have already allocated in 2020 more than $500,000 to be used for rent and utility assistance for those persons who've been adversely affected by the economic effects of COVID. The mayor and city council dedicated more than another $250,000 for small business assistance for small businesses that had experienced financial strain because of COVID. The council is getting ready to allocate an additional almost $500,000 to retrain people and retool their skills so that if maybe their job was lost temporarily or permanently as a result of COVID, they have a way to get retrained and not have to handle that expense themselves so that they can be productive. And the city council is also setting aside funds with some of these CARES money that came during the previous administration's allotments to be used for kind of a reserve for additional social service expenses that might come up as a result of future evictions or when some of these social programs run out of funds. All of these programs that the city council has authorized remain underutilized. Yes, we've given out grants through the Community Investment Corporation of Decatur to small businesses, and yes, our partner Dove has given out substantial sums for rent and utility assistance. But all of these funds that the city council has authorized using the CARES money from 2020 have not been fully utilized. So there is still money available, and contact Dove if you need additional rent or utility assistance. Contact the Community Investment Corporation of Decatur, or CICD, if you're a small business. And those rules have been relaxed a little bit, for small businesses anyway, that even expenses incurred as a direct result of COVID in 2021 are eligible. Originally, only expenses in 2020 were eligible. If you're a small business that is interested and think that you have some losses that you've sustained as a result of COVID, I encourage you to call the CICD. Their number is 217-423-0352. Again, that number is 217-423-0352. Despite the fact we've been fairly successful at bringing these funds in, our city staff has not only diligently but exhaustively pursued every opportunity for state and federal funding, and we will continue to do so. As a result, the city council has been reimbursed for several $1,000,000 of costs that it sustained in 2020, most of it all related to COVID expenses. Now, some of these costs were costs that the city council had already put in their budget, but many of them were ones that were specialized to COVID and we had not anticipated in the budget, and so those reimbursed some of those expenses. Now that those have been reimbursed to the city, we plan to use a portion of these funds to rebuild the city's depleted financial reserves, but also the city council decided last Monday to put a substantial portion of these reimbursed funds into an account that will allow us to increase the amount of demolition and clearing of properties where there are derelict buildings and debris on them to improve the speed as well as the effectiveness of our neighborhood revitalization program. Separate from CARES, because that was a legislation approved under the previous administration, the new administration has its own bill, maybe you've heard of it, called the American Relief Plan, or ARP. It provides additional funds to state and local governments. These are all one-time revenues, so we have to use them for one-time expenses. And like funds provided under CARES under the previous administration, these funds are also restricted. Some of the categories that it's restricted to are similar to the ones that were used before in 2020, but some of them are new. The ARP funds can only be used for direct COVID costs. It provides additional funds for small businesses, but we've decided that that's probably not necessary because the funds we've allocated for small business already are not being fully utilized. The second category provides for what's called revenue offsets, meaning that since the city of Decatur and cities and counties throughout the nation have suffered significant losses in their normal revenues directly related to the economic effects of COVID, some of those can be reimbursed. For example, the city lost more than $3 million in 2020 from revenue reductions directly as a result of COVID, and we expect a revenue loss in 2021 of around $2 million. So the new bill provides for some of that to be offset. But the city council decided when they were talking about this at their last meeting that most of these funds for the ARP, the the new bill and under the current administration will be used for water, sewer, and broadband expenses. They might like to spend it for road work, for example. There's always more roads that we need to do that we don't have enough money to do. But the legislation from Washington is very specific. If it's used for infrastructure, it must be used for water, sewer, or broadband, just those three categories. So the City Council has begun analyzing, with staff's assistance, what sort of projects we are most in need of in the water, sewer, and broadband category here in Decatur. In the weeks ahead, I'm going to give you more information about that as the council works through some of those decisions and makes revisions to their budget to reflect how these funds will be used. But I want you to know that they are very serious about being good stewards of these funds and making sure that they are used on the most important projects that meet the federal requirements, the most important projects that the city is most in need of. And that dialogue will take place in open meetings at the City Council. And so I'll be back to give you updates about them. So thank you for tuning in and for giving us this opportunity to tell you more about what's going on with your city government. Until next time, thanks again.